We met and I saw you speak. That's what it was. I saw you speak, you're
Mm.
presenting. And my first thought was, I gotta know this girl. I gotta know this girl. She has the energy that I want to bring when I talk. So, and the passion, and it was just a cool story. So I want to read your bio really quick, just so people can go, okay, well, who is Jennifer? Why do we need to know? So Jennifer, Germaine, you are the founder of Breathe Fire into Life. It's a mission to help women step into the greatness by creating a business and life that turns them on. Love it. And founding and scaling nationally a law, oh, I lied to you. After founding and scaling nationally a law firm as a disconnected and unhappy workaholic, Jennifer chose to sell her firm and create a business she was passionate about, exploring interconnectively of a human creativity, connection, and passion. This is 100% you. When you told me you had a law firm, you're like, you know what? About that. It's got to go. I'm going, to me, I thought stability. That was the first thought that came to my mind when you're like, I'm going to not throw this away. I'm going to sell this and start up, quote unquote, a fun business, a happy business, a life business, right? The butterfly business, right? But like how people like picture it,
Yeah.
and so it's, to me, my first thought, my gut went, stability just went out the window. And then
Mm.
it took me a second to go, I'm so happy for that she did it. But the first thought was, whew, that's a change. That's a change. So tell us all about it. Let me hear it, girl.
Yeah, yeah. And it did feel like that. So I had been a lawyer for, what was it, like 13, 14 years when I finally ended up selling. I started my law firm. I was at solo. Well, I started it solo, but for 3 years, I had this law firm. I grew it where I was the top of the game. Like I was looked at as the expert in my industry. I was speaking nationally. I had clients nationally. I had a team underneath me, but I was not happy. It was like, what is going on inside of me where there's still this disconnect? And I had to look into that. And once I started to figure that out, I realized, I don't believe I've always wanted to be a lawyer. And I've known this my whole life.
Wow.
It wasn't that I thought as a little child I was going to be a lawyer. There's a lot of people that tell me this story. And I was like, I wasn't. I was a senior at college and was like, what else? And I was an accountant and I decided to be a lawyer. So it was just such a logical minded process. And I realized if you look at, I always explain, like if you look at a whole pie, being a lawyer was just a slice of the abilities that I had in the world.
Yes, I
So I
love it.
decided to, I started coaching in 2019. So I had both of them going on for a long time, but I realized when I went into the law firm, I was grinding and like in this hustle mentality, and it was draining me. And then when I was in the coaching, I was uplifted and I was excited and I loved working with my clients. And there was the dualities that I was like, what's going on here? I think it's time to let the law completely go. So I
Wow.
did, but right after that, what you're getting to is like my brain. There's a lot of grief because I worked with clients regularly, like they stayed with me for years. So I talked with my clients over and over again. Some of them I had for probably a decade. And it was a lot of grief, like letting go of the team and letting go of all those clients, letting go of a whole identity of who everyone knows me as. Like everyone knew me as a lawyer. That was what felt like the rug being pulled out from under me. So I had to sit in it and just be there. And then my mind played games of like, you were really successful over there. Now you're not because you're
Yeah.
beginning again. And it was that it was painful at times having that go through. So to say that it was all, lovely and great, I could lie to you guys and say that because there was that piece. It also, on the other perspective, felt like total freedom. So that is right. But there was both of them going on at the same time, like grief and being super confused of like, what does this path look like? How I can't believe you're beginning again. I can't believe you're beginning again. And the other part is like, I'm beginning again. Woohoo! So it is totally a duality that was playing out. So the fact that you played to both of those going on in you, they were going on in me too.
Wow. And that's literally, so you say transformation coach, and I feel like that's the transformation that people experience. And you can go either way. You can keep pushing through, or you're like, you know what? I'm actually just going to go back to what I know. And I know it the day in, day out. And I think that's where a lot of the transition happens. I was just speaking with somebody on a different episode, and they were talking about, I forget the quote, so I'm not going to butcher it, but basically they were saying that change is easy. It's the transformation that's hard. And I think that's exactly what you just kind of described. Like there was change, right? You saw that you love life coaching. You like, this made you happy, but there was grief, there's all that stuff. But then it's the now what step. And I think that's kind of what you really kind of talk about. Cause I think we all have that inner fire that you talk about. It's like, oh, this makes me happy. I'm going to do my side hustle and I'm going to do dance because I love dance, but I'm only going to do it in my kitchen because I don't want anybody else to know. And I can't afford it or whatever the things that we tell ourselves. Right. And so I think you really kind of talk more about that next step. Okay. I have that feeling. This makes me burn up. What now? And what's that look like?
And I honestly think there is a difference between change and transformation. It's the fact that we hold the dualities of both at the same time that I've started to realize. And this has been a practice of mine over and over again. But I was holding the grief and the loss and the confusion and feeling lost. But then once I would acknowledge that, like become really aware of it, I was like, but that means I'm also holding the opposite at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like getting used to playing with both over and over again, where you start to live in the other space. And I always say transmute it from one to the other, because I think it's not like I can get rid of the loss and the grief, right? You can go through it, but it was there. It was there at the same time, and realizing that which one do I want to play with right now? Once I see this come in the window, can I actually bring the other one through too?
So how does that look? Because, we've all been through a transformation, right? We've all been through a change, but a lot of times when that two roads come, a lot of us just go back to our comfort zone, right?
Mm.
Whether it could be working out, it could be trying to eat healthy, it could be doing a new job. I'm going to start applying for jobs, but now interviews are going well and I'm just going to step back, right? Because I know my 9 to 5 is comfortable. Or moving, right? There's so many things. It's not just starting a new business, which I feel like you cover as well as the life coach part of you. And so what does that process look like? Because to me, again, my first thought is, again, stability, scary. And I think about, for me, when I went through all my transformations and I continue to go through transformations, I think about that support. And for me, it's not just the support that I gave myself, but the support that I surrounded myself with. Do you think that's a good piece for transformation?
Support? Are you asking about that specifically? So the support is inside of yourself, is what you're looking for. And I'm going to give you something I'm going through now, so people can see, like, I still go through it. It's a lifelong practice to go through this. And what I was coming up with is, where is this business going? And I would notice that I would become confused and lost about, like, oh, what's my next steps? I'm not sure, like, here's what I'm picturing, but why am I so confused and lost? So that was going on in me. And I started journaling about it whenever it would come up, like, what are actually the thoughts? And I would sit in it, because I had realized for months it was kind of driving the ship, where I wasn't taking any action. It was freezing me up. I was staying safe and going, like you said, going back. I was staying in it instead of seeing what's the opposite side of it. So I decided to sit in it and been like, what is this trying to tell me? What are the thoughts that are going under this confusion and loss? And what I found out is, like, is this going to work? This isn't going to work. Nothing has changed. So when I got there, I realized, all right, what if I can alchemize that to the opposite and tell myself everything has already changed?
Oh,
And sit in that and see what it feels like. If everything is already changed, how does that feel in my body? Does my body tighten up like it did? Because when in confusion and loss, I follow my body a lot. I like tighten. And I was like, oh man, I don't know. I'll pick up my phone and start scrolling to see what everyone else is doing. And it's like this nasty rhythm that I was getting. And I was like doing it over and over. And I was like, wait a second. Every time I do one of those triggers, I stop. I write it out again. It's like, I don't know. I have not done it enough, whatever. And then I was like, but I have done it enough. Everything's already changed. I feel myself relax. And then it's like, if everything's already changed, what would I do? And I would take action. So it's like doing that. That's one where I would see the opposite. I sat in it. And then I realized, what is the other side? And I started playing in that. And once I could relax and my body relaxes, it's interesting to see where our mind goes. Our mind is like, oh, I'm ready now. I'm ready to step out and do something different.
that's so beautifully well spoken. Because one of the things I work with my clients with, and I believe doing with myself, was living the life or picturing your life of the person you want to be or the person that you idolize, right? So what are they doing in the morning, like the routines, things like that. And what does that feel like, right? What does that look like to you? And I think sometimes we go right to the money piece of, oh, well, I spend my money this way and things like that. But it's that mindset that you were just talking about. How does it feel inside of me? What is my body doing? And there's so much awareness that comes around there. And I love journaling. I always encourage journaling because that's exactly what you're doing. You're creating that awareness, but you're also kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, that support with ourselves. We're
Mm.
supporting ourselves by creating that awareness, seeing what feels right, and kind of going with it.
Hmm. Yeah, and I am also an avid journaler, but I'm a reader, so I like to read. But I do know some clients I've worked with where they literally will voice it to hear the words and like listen to themselves and be like, oh, this is what's going on for me. Because sometimes it's hard for us to hear what's actually going on inside of our heads. So building up your own support system means like trying to just see the thoughts for real, like get them in front of you so you can look at them in a different way instead of keeping them trapped in your minds. Then you can kind of play with the opposite. And I don't know about you, I will say this, when I started my journey and where I'm at now, I used to be a number where I would numb my body out completely. So, how I actually, one of the ways that I find that I'm really stressed and I become aware of stress is through my body.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
I'm always looking for tension. And that's a sign for me. And what you're saying about money, I believe money is always an illusion because I have money fears that come up all the time. And I know that is, and I'll tense up. And right here, it's like knots that'll form under me. Oh, they are so bad, Jessica. And the money story will play out like you don't have enough money. And I went through it enough because I think it's little practices of day to day to realize that's not true. It's just fears like literally taking over my mind. And I just have to start and I'll go and stop instead of looking at money, looking at financials, looking at data, and I'll actually go and try to do something to my body. Like I've got, I mean, just sitting next to me, people can't see this, but I've got like acupuncture balls. I've got tension relief balls. I've got a bunch of stuff where when my body starts firing, I know, let's switch that. Let's
Yeah.
change it. Because if I can change in my body, my mind will shift.
And it's so true. And, I always talk about how stress is a reaction change. And the way we react is first is your body, right? And so for you to have that awareness, I think it kind of talks about some of the things that you were doing before. You have to create that awareness because sometimes when we're going through this transition, and this is something you could have done if you got fired, you got a divorce, you lost your house, the negative stress, sometimes we really ignore a lot of those stressors in that body that's happening. So it's really awesome that you, even when you're going through all that transition, that you were able to see it, but you still practice becoming aware of what you go through on a daily basis because you're going to experience it every day, right? There's some hard days in the business where you're like, you know what about that 9 to 5 again, right? And then your body goes, nope.
Yeah. Yeah, it speaks to you. And like I said, it's just a practice every day. So I do things every day to intentionally practice with my body. Like I do tension relief every single day, even when my body is not screaming at me that it needs it. So I can feel into it. I also dance every day. Like that's because I believe it was, so I'm a number. I mentioned that it's really hard for me to get into play and pleasure and sensuality and sexuality. So it's a practice for me. Every day I set aside time to be like, hey, what sounds nourishing? What's messy? I don't like to get messy. What's something that's what my logical brain tells me, like, don't get messy. Then you have to clean it up and spend more time on it. But that's so I practice being messy. Like sometimes I've thrown eggs on the ground and been like, I am frustrated. I've thrown eggs down and giggled and laughed and cleaned it up and had my puppy get in it and like mushed it with my feet. Something to really pull myself way out of my safe zone. But I practice the little pieces every single day so I can do it more often in my daily basis. And I feel like that's where awareness and the practice is where it always starts for me.
It's 100%. It's every single day. And I always, relate it to, it's like working out, right? You don't just get abs overnight. You don't start to look good and then you never have to work out again, right? It's the same thing. You have to practice. But I kind of want to get back to this transition because I know so many people, want this, they see it, they taste it, right? So speaking to different people here, right? There's the one that maybe has a side hustle that makes them fired up. There's the woman that you're talking about, like, or I mentioned earlier, dances in the kitchen, and maybe wants to become dance more on the weekends, or maybe just wants to be a hiker, right? And that's just something that creating a hobby that makes them fired up. what's another way someone can get fired up? So I'm thinking hobbies, I'm thinking business. What's another transformation of someone can go through?
Mm. So whatever you are drawn to is your next transformation. I always call it what's activating you. So it could be just qualities that you see in another person. So I'll have people come up to me and say, "You're so playful and free feeling." And I
Oh,
was like, "Oh, well, that's in you because you see it in somebody else." So it's just about bringing that out, like in the practices to come through it. In the practices to see where your mind is going to tell you no. It's going to tell you no as soon as you're like, I should be dancing in the kitchen. I should go dance out in public. I should dance more. That's where your mind's going to come right afterwards and tell you some story of like, that's not safe or you shouldn't be doing it, but it won't say the words, that's not safe. So for me, when I was going through a transition and I decided I desired to be a coach, here I am with this law firm, super successful, have a team. And I was at a 10-day retreat. So I created a lot of space for myself. I didn't know this was going to happen, but it happened. I was like, I would really like to be a coach, came out with all that space. I finally gave myself, my mind space to just be. Came out that I desired to be a coach. I think space is a huge key, by the way. For everyone listening, I think space is how you find yourself. I decided I wanted to be a coach. Right after that, the thing that comes up in my mind is that does not make any sense, Jen. Push that to the back. It's like, that does not make any sense. And I've realized over time, every time I've desired a transformation for myself, and let's just take dancing, because I like dancing and I just did this ecstatic dancing last weekend for the first time. I was just like, I desire to go here. I don't really understand what it is. I don't know what's going to happen here. It was 8:30 in the morning. I was like, is it going to be a rave? I don't know. I'm an introverted person. I don't like a lot of people. But I noticed in my head the same thing happened. And this is years after that experience. I said in 2019 is when I started my coaching. But the same thing happened is like, I desire to go to this dancing that I've heard about. And then my head pops up and goes, that doesn't make any sense, Jen. That sounds crazy. That's not what you're into. You don't like dancing with a big group of people. So it's getting very aware. It's like, oh, there it is again. Ha, funny. I've seen you before. Maybe you name it. Maybe you name like that piece of you is like, welcome back, my dear old friend, and just loving it up and allowing it to be what it is. So then you can say, oh, I've seen it. Let's move forward. And it doesn't seem so scary, but our brains are going to try to scare us and try to stop us a lot. And it's just the practice of getting used to it and be like, oh, there it
yeah.
is again.
Oh, I love it. So next question for you. So say someone's listening right now and they're like, okay, I have a transformation. I have that fire. I have that thing I'm talking negative to. Maybe, that's a dumb thing or that doesn't make sense or telling myself no in the various ways. What is an ideal client for you? Like what's that client that you are looking for to connect with?
Yeah, and it's very similar. So I work with a lot of very high achieving women. It's usually entrepreneurs or like CEOs somewhere on the C-suite where they're very driven. And they've got a passion inside them where they see the world differently. Like there's this humanity aspect where they want to change who humans are and they desire to get the word out more. But the thing that's going on for them, usually on the inside, is that there's a piece of them that really likes to be introverted and hidden. They think it seems really scary to get their message out in a big way, speak on stages, be seen by a lot of people. Or I should say, and they just desire to live life. They desire to, dance. They desire to have the freedom to take vacations unplugged. It's the little things in life that they have shut out because they have focused so strongly on work. Maybe it's deeper intimacy with their partners, deeper sexuality, sensuality. It could even be friendships. And my ideal client that I work with, all of that is me.
Yeah.
Right? It's inside of me where I'm this little girl that would rather stay curled up in her house than go out in public or even talking to you, Jessica. But I've gotten used to that part and realized when I can see what's playing out, there is a capacity to live this very vibrant life. But it's doing those every time a whisper comes up of like, here's the next thing I'd really love to do, instead of shutting it down, is to playing into it and being like, what happens if I would listen to that whisper? What
Yeah.
happens if I'd go for the thing that I keep telling myself, that does not make any sense? And when you start taking the little steps, because the little steps, the little pieces that I went for, like going to that retreat for 10 days without going in my office and working, that was a little step that got me to sell this law firm. It's the baby steps, the little whispers that you follow that swings the big doors. I always say small hinges swing big doors. So don't pay attention to the big doors, pay attention to the little messages you're getting.
I love that because I 100% agree with that. It's the baby steps, it's the bite-sized pieces is what I say, just to get the ball rolling. You can't wake up today and go, I want to run a marathon. I can't wake up today and say, I'm going to get myself abs, right? So everything does take time, and it's finding those little baby steps to get you there to create that habit. So I absolutely love that. So say someone's listening and they're like, check, check, check. That is me. I'm the ideal client. I feel like the next question is, what is it like to work with a transition life coach with you? I just feel like there's, as we know, there's so many coaches out there. So what would be, what's like a typical, and I'm air quoting over here, a typical process working with you?
Yeah, so I work privately with individuals, so I can go into their mind and help them understand it and help them see the beauty in it. Because a lot of times we fight ourselves, and it sounds counterintuitive, but we're not very loving and kind. We're actually very hard on that aspect of us that is always telling us no. And I help people understand what's going on in front of them, because there's a logical piece of us, but there's this emotional piece that's huge that actually comes in to try to trump over the logical mind. And people don't really understand how that plays out with them and their body connection. So I help them unplug all of these pieces, and it feels like freedom. All of a sudden, they'll be able to take steps very, very quickly. A lot of people come in a container of 30 days for me, and they're completely shocked at the results that they can get in 30 days once they understand what's going on for them. And to be honest, Jessica, there isn't anyone that I've coached the same.
Yeah.
Every single person comes in very unique, and that's what's unique with me is I have a lot of tenderness and kindness. Sometimes I'm direct and whatnot, but I help people feel into, oh wow. What I get told a lot, some people, I was talking to somebody recently that I'm coaching, she's like, I found that I took this unplugged vacation, and the vacation me is who I desire to live all the time. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I did. It was like vacation to me is so exciting and like divine, and she's relaxed. I just desire to be vacation me all the time. Why can I not be vacation me all the time? So I help people become vacation me.
Oh, I love that. That's so simplified. It's just that person, like you said, because sometimes we can look at other people, and we've mentioned that before, like, oh, that playful, fun person. But who are you when you're completely relaxed? And usually it's when we're on vacation, right? Maybe it's at a resort, maybe it's, however you picture yourself vacationing. And that person is a little bit different than the 9 to 5 person. So I absolutely love that. That's beautifully well said. I definitely agree. So now again, same person, they're listening. They're like, yep, check, check. That's how I want to work with her. What is the best way to contact you?
I would say you could follow me on Instagram if you just want a taste, because a lot of people that come to me are like, I don't know, I want to see what this woman's still about. Because trust is a big thing with me and getting consent. So Instagram, I'm at Jen, Jenn, period, Germaine, Germaine. Otherwise, they can check out the website too, and that's the breathefireintoLife.com.
Awesome. And wherever you're watching this episode or listening in, I'm going to have that all repeated for everybody. So there's no worries there. Before we get into the lightning round, which I did warn you about, is there any last words that you feel that the listeners or whoever's watching should know?
This is my piece of advice for everyone is as adults, we become so structured. We tend to live in stress, and we don't even realize how much stress we're living in, especially in America, right? Like all we do is live the busy life, the 9 to 5, the grind. There's an aspect of us that is desiring the play. And if you can tap into play more often, you would be surprised at how much you can shift. It is the gateway to all the sensuality, sexuality, the higher, the joy, the happiness, the delight. It's usually getting in touch with play. So that's a little message I love to leave people with is it is possible for you too. It helps, take away the exhaustion. It is the peace that leads to the less exhaustion.
I love that. That is so beautiful. Really appreciate you. So now let's do it. Let's get into the lightning round.
Yes,
Are you ready?
I am. Let's go.
Okay, so since we're talking about Play Me, what is your favorite board game?
Favorite board game, Monopoly.
Oh, okay. That was quick. Okay, so okay, where's your favorite place to vacation?
Okay, I just moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and it is still my favorite place to vacation right now. I am loving everything and exploring. So my hometown, my new hometown, yeah, or England. My grandmother's from Oxford, England, so I'd love to go back there.
Oh, so cool. So
Mhm.
are you a lake or a beach lady?
I'm all water. I grew up on the Mississippi River, so I actually would say I'm a river person. So I'm gonna go in between. But now we're close to the beach, so we go to the beach more often.
You talked a lot about like your inner child. What is to say a lot? You talked about your inner child. What was your favorite candy growing up?
Ooh, ooh, that's a lot. So I never have one favorite, but my grandpa used to, what's coming up is those like pink mints that like melt in your mouth. And every time I'd go and visit him, I loved those because my parents never bought them. And I like Starburst and Skittles and all those things. Now I love dark chocolate, so I'm quite the opposite. But as a child, that's what I loved. I don't have any of the other stuff.
You mentioned your dog. What kind of dog do you have?
Golden Retriever. She's 6 months old, named Nikki, and she is a burst of energy. I love her. Mm.
And what is the favorite thing you do with your dog?
Play, 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 play. The other day, she got in the, like, we have a spring, a mountain spring on our property, and she turned it into a mud hole. And I just died laughing with her. And then I had to go and clean her off. But yeah, it was just phenomenal.
Oh my goodness. All right, last question. What is your way to relieve stress?
There's so many. Playing is one, getting in touch with my inner child. Dancing is probably my number one. I love to dance and move my body around and see wherever it'll take me.
I love it. Jen, thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy, crazy schedule and making time for me today. So I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you.
I love this, Jessica. I'm glad you're putting this out into the world, and thanks for inviting me.